Hey everyone, Robert Ferringo of Doc Sports, back with your weekly planner for sports betting. If you enjoy this video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and you'll be alerted to all of the videos that I produce on a weekly basis. Also, be sure to go down in the description below and click on that free 60 link right there. That will take you to Doc Sports and give you $60 credit, free, obviously, towards any handicapper in any sport for any package that you want. For instance, football top games are normally $30 a piece. That free $60 will get you 2 top games, and you can use them on different handicappers. You could get, say, Griffin Murphy's top game in college football on Saturday and Doc Sports' top game in the NFL on Sunday, absolutely free. Or you could use it towards a weekly package of, say, Rafael Esparza or Arun Shiva's NBA picks. Those normally run around $99 for a weekly package. So that's a severe discount off of that. So, all right. So with the weekly planner, as I have laid out in the past, we're just trying to take the wide perspective, right? Take the weekly view, kind of plan ahead. All right. Hence the name, in terms of what we're looking at and what our expectations are for the week across a variety of sports. Now, normally I would be breaking down a little bit of NBA, a little NHL, a little college basketball, a little football. This week, I'm going to focus on college basketball. That way you can get a little bit more of an idea of what I'm trying to do with these videos and where my focus is as a professional handicapper. Now, one of the things I talk about it is you can't just, each day isn't an individual event. I know there are some mathematicians out there that would argue with that each game is its own individual event and they don't correlate to any of the other incidents in terms of games before or after. That's ridiculous. That's nonsense. These are human beings. There's emotions involved in gambling, and with these players, fans, bettors, everyone involved, like, things don't survive in a vacuum. Right? They don't exist in a vacuum. This one game being played today is influenced by the games that came before it and the games that are going to come after it. So I'm trying to take a broad perspective here to help you plan out some points of attack, some weak lines, some situations that you might be able to take advantage of. And this week, we're going to use college basketball as an example of that. All right. So first, I'm going to talk about 6 teams that I am going to be specifically watching and really have my eye on this week. I may not bet on any of these games or bet on this team in any of these situations, but I'm going to be watching them very closely to gather information that maybe we can use for the future, as in this weekend, or maybe we can use for the future as in during conference play. Okay. First team that we're going to look at in college basketball this week is North Carolina. All right. North Carolina, blue blood program. Came into the regular season with high expectations as per usual. Have not met those expectations yet. North Carolina is out of the top 25. They're 6-4 on the season. They've seemingly lost every big game that they've played, but they aren't really bad losses. Like, they lost to Auburn, they lost to Alabama, they lost to Kansas, they lost to Michigan State. That's 3 top 10 teams, and then kind of a top 15-ish team in Michigan State. So not bad losses, but they're still 6-4 and outside of the top 10. So North Carolina, you've got to imagine, is playing with a little bit of desperation, because even though they played a very challenging non-conference schedule, they don't have many non-conference wins. Now, you'd like to think that they'd be able to pick up and make up for that during ACC regular season play to secure that bid into the NCAA tournament. However, these big marquee non-conference games are critical. They're critical for a team's psyche as much as they are for their NCAA tournament resume. And North Carolina is going to be playing in 2 of the biggest games of the week this week. All right. On Tuesday, they're going to be playing against number 7 Florida in Charlotte. Okay. So advantage North Carolina in this game. It's not a home game, but you have to imagine that they're going to have 80 to 90% of the home crowd, with the game being in Charlotte. Now, North Carolina, I project them to be a 3-point underdog in this game on Tuesday. And they're facing a smoking hot Florida team. Florida's undefeated. They're 10-0. They just hammered a pretty good Arizona State team. Now, Florida is 10-0, but North Carolina probably represents the best team that they have faced so far. So for Florida, this is a chance to show, to get that 11th straight win, keep moving up in the rankings and show that they are for real, as well as add to their resume. But again, North Carolina playing a little closer to home, maybe a little bit more desperation for them. Probably going to be an underdog in this game, as they should be. Florida hasn't just been good straight up. They've been phenomenal against the spread this year. Really undervalued team that plays fast, scores a lot of points, and are doing some really good things despite the distraction of their head coach being involved in kind of a weird, like inappropriate relationship, sex scandal kind of thing prior to the season. That obviously hasn't been a distraction for this team. So North Carolina at home, or not at home, in Charlotte on Tuesday, big game against Florida. Then on Saturday, they head north to Madison Square Garden, where they're going to take on number 18 UCLA in another just huge game. Now that game is Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock. So again, a little bit of an advantage for North Carolina. Playing closer to home, you would imagine that they would have a little bit more of the crowd. Also, the fact that it's a 3 o'clock game that works against UCLA, that team traveling west to east. So yeah, they have 2 opportunities this week with North Carolina to get top 20 wins, to get resume building wins. Okay. UCLA, by the way, team to watch. They're coming off a huge win, semi on the road, against Arizona, longtime rival of theirs, last weekend on Saturday. And they have that big game against North Carolina this coming Saturday at Madison Square Garden. Well, smack in between this week on Tuesday, they're going to be about a 30-point favorite against Prairie View. So it's going to be interesting to watch the Bruins this week as well. Are they going to have that letdown look-ahead spot? Coming off that big Arizona win, they got North Carolina on deck, 30-plus point favorite, midweek snoozer of a game. What's their attitude going to be like taking on Prairie View? But North Carolina, 2 chances to get a marquee win this week. They're the number 1 team that I'm going to be watching in college basketball. All right, number 2 team, mentioned before, is Auburn. All right, number 2 in the country behind SEC foe Tennessee. Auburn is coming off a neutral site game where they just absolutely thrashed Ohio State. That's been kind of a pattern for Auburn this year. They don't just win games, they kind of annihilate people. They are beating good teams by double digits. When they get on a roll, they really get on a roll. I don't know if anybody in the country has the ceiling that Auburn has in terms of when they're playing their best basketball. I don't think anybody can beat them. But as always with Bruce Pearl teams, they're kind of erratic, right? They're going to have some performances and some games where you're just like, what is going on? Like, how is this team playing this poorly with that level of talent? So they're in an interesting spot, coming off that nearly 40-point win over Ohio State, absolute bloodbath of a game. Then this weekend on Saturday in Birmingham, so another neutral site game where Auburn is going to have a significant home crowd advantage, like North Carolina playing in Charlotte, where I expect Auburn to be double-digit favorites against Purdue, number 16 Purdue. So 2 big games for Auburn against Big Ten teams this week. And again, like I mentioned with UCLA, smack in the middle on Tuesday, they have a game against Georgia State, little Sun Belt squad coming to visit Auburn. Auburn's going to be about a 34, 35-point favorite in that game. Is this going to be one where they kind of drag their feet through the first half? Maybe they're only up 6 or 8 points at halftime, then they hit the Jets and win by 25. Or is this team going to deliver the knockout punch? Are they going to be up 24 at halftime and work their way to a 40, 45-point win and cover that number on Wednesday? That's could be a situation for a daring bettor to take those points with Georgia State on Tuesday, considering that Auburn is, again, in that letdown look-ahead situation, just like UCLA that I mentioned before. So Auburn is a team that I'm going to watch. Are they going to continue to beat good teams, and Purdue is a good team, by double digits and keep covering these big numbers? And what's that going to mean for Auburn once they get into conference play as well? So number 2 Auburn is the number 2 team that I'm going to keep an eye on. All right, number 3, this team isn't on a lot of people's radar right now, but Wichita State. Wichita State is a team that I've had circled since the beginning of the year. This is a team that I want to keep some tabs on. Okay, they were severe underachievers. Wichita State has been one of the best mid-major programs in college basketball for over 20 years. Okay, made a coaching change. Paul Mills, now in his 2nd year after kind of underachieving in his first season, has a better team, has a more stable team this year. Are they going to be able to elevate their play compared to the kind of pretty much the mess we've seen the last couple of seasons in Wichita? Now, they're 8-2 already this year, so they are playing a little bit of good basketball. However, they just got demolished over the weekend against DePaul. Small spread game. DePaul is another one of those teams that Chris Holtman is doing a really good job there, really quickly turning them around, getting them. I mean, for DePaul, they're one of the dregs, one of the worst programs in college basketball over the last 35 years. He has got them to the level of baseline competence, okay? Wichita State, that's not the bar. The bar is to be competitive, to be competing for NCAA tournament bids, stuff like that. I don't think they're quite there yet, but how improved are they here in year two? They just got rocked by DePaul, but they have two really interesting games this week. Okay, on Tuesday, they're playing against Kansas City, UMKC to some. That's Marvin Menzies' team. Wichita State, coming off that blowout loss, they're going to be big favorites at home. They're going to be about 14, 15-point favorites on Tuesday against this Kansas City team. This Kansas City team that's been really up and down. I was able to cash on them this last weekend, but they are not performing as well as I expected with 5 returning starters back from last year. So kind of an intriguing game there. The bigger point is Wichita State coming off that loss. You think they're going to want to bounce back as a really big favorite, which they haven't kind of proven that they can be trusted to cover those numbers. They have a bigger game against Kansas State this weekend on Saturday at home. So 2 big home games for Wichita State. But are they going to be looking past Kansas City to that game against an in-state rival, Big 12 opponent, just a more marquee game for Wichita State this Saturday? So how are they going to perform on Wednesday against Kansas City? And what is that going to do to that line against Kansas State on Saturday? If they come out and they blow out Kansas City and they win by 20, 25 points and cover that number, I already am expecting Wichita State to be around a 1.5 point favorite this Saturday against Kansas State. Very similar to that Dayton line that we saw over the weekend. I think Wichita State will be favored. Now, if they don't cover against Kansas City, say they only win that game by 6 and they don't cover, will that kind of shift the numbers where maybe Wichita State opens as a home underdog on Saturday against Kansas State, and then maybe there's a little bit of inherent money line value on that game? Or, as I mentioned, if Kansas State or Wichita State comes out, takes care of business, blows Kansas City out, wins by 20, 25 points, will we lose a little bit of value on that home team? Will they become maybe a 2.5, a 3-point favorite against Kansas State on Saturday? So that's what I'm looking for Wichita State. They have a really huge home court advantage, one of the best mid-major home court advantages in the country. How is that going to pay dividends for them this week in those 2 big home games? All right. Okay, moving on. Team number 4 that I'm watching is Memphis, number 21 in the country. Memphis has been playing a lot of big games. They're playing really well. Penny Hardaway has been kind of a joke as a head coach, frankly, in the sports betting world. At least he has been. Anyway, his teams have been massive underachievers these last few seasons. He's been one of those guys who can collect a lot of talent, but his in-game management, his rotations, it just hasn't worked with Hardaway in Memphis. I think everyone will kind of agree with that. However, these guys are playing really good this year. Something has clicked for this team this year. I think it's that veteran backcourt that he has. He's finally got the right combination of veteran guards. They already have wins over Connecticut and Michigan State. They nearly won the Maui Invitational. They lost to Auburn in the championship game of that. This past Saturday, they actually scored a really nice true road win over Clemson. That was that weird 11 a.m. tip on Saturday, but Memphis went on the road, hostile environment, beat a really solid Clemson team in overtime, okay? Doesn't end there. They're back on the road this Wednesday at Virginia, going to play another ACC team in their home gym. Top 25 Memphis team, playing a Virginia team that frankly isn't very good. I think it was a huge red flag when Bennett left at the beginning of the season, when he retired or stepped away from the program or whatever. A coach won't walk away from a really good team. If Bennett thought that he had a Sweet 16 potential team or even just an NCAA tournament caliber team in Virginia, I think he sticks. I think he kind of looked at his roster this year, was like, these guys aren't very good. I'm just going to get out of here now rather than finishing below 500. Virginia hasn't been very good this season. However, they are really, really good in their home gym. They have been really, really good in the John Paul Jones Arena for several years here, okay? I think Virginia is going to be a home underdog. Can Memphis get back-to-back true road wins against ACC opponents, beating Clemson on the road? Can they beat Virginia on the road? That's going to be really interesting to see how they handle being a road favorite in that situation and whether they can continue to earn the trust that they're building up with their solid early play. But it doesn't end there for Memphis. After that big game on Wednesday at Virginia, on Saturday, they have a home game against Mississippi State. So they really loaded up the schedule. They're going to be a favorite in that game. If they lose at Virginia on Wednesday, how is that going to influence that line against an SEC program on Saturday? And if they beat Virginia, they cover another spread, say they win by 8 or 10 at Virginia, what's that going to do to that Mississippi State line? I think right now I have it projected. This is as of Monday afternoon. I have Memphis projected as about a 2.5-point home favorite against Mississippi State. They cover against Virginia. I think that number gets up to 4.5 and 5. And then maybe we start to look at Mississippi State versus if Memphis goes to Virginia, gets blown out. Okay, let's say that happens, right? They're the better team, but Virginia's tough at home. Memphis gets blown out. That might shrink that number back to 1.5, 2 for Memphis against Mississippi State on Saturday and set them up for a bounce back performance where, they win at Clemson, lose at Virginia, snap back to it. I think they're a little bit better than Mississippi State. So that Wednesday game is real at Virginia is really a fulcrum game for Memphis here for this week and what their numbers are going to do. So they are another team that I have my eye on. Okay. Next is Xavier. All right, this is the 5th team that I'm looking at, Sean Miller's team. They are number 2 in the country in terms of college basketball experience, one of the oldest teams in the country. Unfortunately, they had some preseason injuries. This was a team that I was looking very favorably upon. I thought they were really undervalued coming into the season, had some injuries in the preseason. A guy like Cam Fletcher that they were hoping was going to be 100% just isn't. Cam Fletcher is just never going to be that guy that he showed flashes of being at Florida State. He's not going to be a contributor for this team. So it's basically the Zach Freemantle show. Zach Freemantle and a bunch of 5th and 6th year seniors going at it. What are they going to do this week? Coming off that loss to Cincinnati over the weekend, a bet that I cashed. They were 8-point underdogs against Cincinnati, had the lead at the half, had the lead in the second half, lost a disappointing game to a really hated rival in Cincinnati. But it doesn't end there. This is a really tough stretch. They had to play at Cincinnati. Now, Wednesday, they go at Connecticut. They're going to be a double-digit underdog in that game, probably 10.5-point underdogs at Connecticut on Wednesday. And then Saturday, they come home and they play Marquette. So Cincinnati at Connecticut against Marquette. That's a tough week for anybody. It's a really tough week for Xavier. They covered the spread against Cincinnati. Are they going to be able to go to Connecticut and be competitive with one of the best teams in the Big East? And then are they going to be able to be competitive at home against one of the best teams in the Big East in Marquette? Okay, this week is going to tell us a lot about this Xavier team. Again, remember, I started with really high expectations. They had some injury issues, lost some players in the preseason, been a little bit sketchy to start out this year. Who is this group? Are they going to be one of those really experienced, veteran, senior-laden, 23, 24-year-old guys playing against 18, 19-year-old kids in Big East play, that they're going to be a feisty underdog? They're going to be an undervalued team. Are they going to be those guys, or are they just not very good? Is this season just not going to work out very well for Miller's group, and their ceiling is going to stay kind of NIT caliber, right? Like mid-tier, mid-table, maybe make a run to the NIT Final Four and send these veterans out that way. What is this Xavier team going to be? And this stretch of these 3 difficult games is really going to be telling to me. Okay? So that's it. So then the last thing that I'm looking at this week, rather than one team, I was going to talk a little bit about Dayton. They're similar thing. Saturday, big win over Marquette. Tuesday, they're going to be double-digit favorites. I have a number at about plus 13 against UNLV. And then Friday, they're playing a rivalry game with Cincinnati. Okay? Ohio basketball is hot right now. Got to tell you. Ohio, a lot of rivalry games, a lot of good teams playing basketball over there. That Dayton-Cincinnati game on Friday, that's going to be probably the marquee game of that day. So Dayton gets honorable mention for teams I'm going to look at. The last thing I want to talk about, in keeping with a lot of the same themes and topics of what I'm kind of going over as we span this week's action, is Sunday. Sunday college basketball next Sunday is going to be a really dangerous time. Really dangerous time for a lot of square bettors. Okay. And the reason why is there are going to be a lot of top 25 teams, a lot of marquee teams with huge spreads. We got a lot of teams like Kansas, Iowa State, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Notre Dame, Georgia, NC State. They are all playing absolute cupcakes. Teams ranked number 300 or lower in the KenPom rankings. Okay, the worst teams in the country, just pure paycheck games going on Sunday. Okay. Now, under normal circumstances, those teams that I just mentioned would run those weak sisters out of the gym. No problem. Kansas can beat whoever they're playing on Sunday. They beat them by 40 if they want. However, how motivated are these teams from major conferences going to be in these paycheck games? A lot of those teams I just mentioned have played a lot of big games recently. Remember that the students are going to be on Christmas break. Seems like a small thing, but when we're talking home court advantage, that's a big part. That's where a lot of these teams derive their strength, right? That home court advantage comes from having those crazy maniacs in the student section rooting for them. Not going to have that. We're in the lull. We're in that Christmas break time for the students. So these teams are going to be playing at home, but without a bit of energy that comes from that home court advantage. So you're going to have all of these teams as 20, 25, 30 plus point favorites in a Sunday game over Christmas break, a few days before Christmas. Most of these players will probably play this game and then go home to see their families or do whatever they're going to be able to do, schedule dependent over Christmas. How motivated are those teams going to be to actually lay the lumber on Sunday against some of these big numbers? Now, it's tough to trust. I can't just say, hey, blindly bet all of these 30-point underdog teams. Because again, we're talking about the worst teams in the country. Worst college basketball teams in the country are going to be going up against some of the best. But just be careful. Okay, maybe have a big day in college basketball on Saturday. Maybe have a losing day. Maybe you want a little bit of action to sprinkle in with your NFL bets on Sunday. Just be wary of these big spreads, these huge monster spreads that we're going to see on Sunday, because I think there's going to be a lot of the public that's very disappointed by the effort that some of these teams from major conferences pump out. Okay, so that's something to keep an eye on. Again, keep your level of expectations consistent relative to the situation. Okay, the situation is you got marquee teams from major conferences playing Sunday afternoon games right before Christmas as monster favorites against big spreads. Motivation level, low. Performance, probably going to be low. So that's something to keep an eye on for this week. So yeah, those are the teams I'm going to be looking at. Those are the games I'm going to be looking at. Give you a little bit of insight on how some of these midweek games are going to influence the spreads and the numbers for these Saturday and Sunday games. And like I said, Sunday might be a day, take the dog for a walk, just watch some football, just kind of chill. Maybe stay away from college basketball next Sunday, because as I mentioned, I think it's going to be a really dangerous day for bettors. But that's it. That's my weekly planner. That's what I'm looking forward to this week in relation to college basketball. You want a free play? I guess I will dig in on one of these and find a free play. Okay, here's my free play. Use North Carolina on the money line as a chase system in one of those bets. They're either going to beat Florida or they're going to beat UCLA. They're going to be underdogs in both games. You can bet $100 on North Carolina on Tuesday against Florida. If they win, that'll probably pay out somewhere around plus 140. Okay, again, underdog plus money on the money line. If they don't beat Florida, bet $100 on them against UCLA. Again, they will be underdogs. I have them at +2 right now. If they lose to Florida, that number might get up to like 3.5, especially depending on what UCLA does against Prairie View on Tuesday. But same situation. I think North Carolina needs a win. I think they're going to get a win. I think they have some built-in situational advantages in both of these games. So even though I've been selling North Carolina stock on the season, I have a hard time seeing them not winning one of these two marquee non-conference games. And that's the thing. Since they're going to be underdogs and you're going to get that plus money line value there, bet $100 against Florida. If they win, boom, free play winner. If they lose against Florida, bet another $100 on them on the money line against UCLA. They just need to win one of the two bets in order for that to be profitable. That is how I would play that. So, all right, that's it for this week. Thank you for taking some time to come visit me here. Be sure to check back next week for our weekly planner. In the meantime, carpe diem and good luck.